In a world obsessed with rankings, two men dare to chisel greatness out of metaphorical granite, one wildly subjective opinion at a time. This show, every episode, we select four icons from a single topic and immortalize them in our own personal halls of fame. Sports movies, we've got our four. Draft picks, sleeper draft picks, we've got our choices as well. But this isn't about what should be on the list. This is about what matters to us. Subjective? Absolutely. Debatable? Always. Set in stone? Until next week, welcome to the Mount Rushmore show, where your top four says everything about you. I'm Mike Mintz. He's Joe Mintz. We are not brothers, although we are related. Our dads are brothers, I guess, if you will. But we're not close. Over on the East Coast resides that man. I'm all the way in the great Northwest. And as far as age goes, I guess I'm the seasoned veteran, if you can't tell from the gray and the beard. He's the young up-and-comer. Joe, last week, first episode, thought it went great. We talked about our favorite sports movies, but there was quite a bit of chatter from a community of people that had their own picks.
There was. One, I'll start by apologizing for the video and echo issues. We hopefully have that resolved this time around. And by the way, Mike, that intro, only second time I've heard it. I don't think it'll ever get old.
It's
Beautiful.
perfect. Beautiful. So, Joe, we got to talk about some of the picks. Family, friends, people that everybody seems to have their own list. And of course, that's the whole point, right? Is that
Right.
you're going to put your own spin on what matters to you. But some ones that make sense to me, Major League, I'm all about. But there was one that kind of came up and we had a discussion about, which was, Forrest Gump. Does that belong on a
Yeah, I have
sports
some
movie
strong
Rushmore?
opinions on this one, Mike. Because we mentioned this earlier. There are movies that have sports involved, but are they a sports movie, right? And Forrest Gump, although there is some athletics happening, he played kick return in Alabama, ping pong
Sure.
champion, ran cross country. But if the movie to me doesn't rely on the outcome being about a sport to dictate the character's overcoming, it can't be a sports movie. Great movie. It could be on my Tom Hanks Mount Rushmore. Could be in my greatest movies of all time Mount Rushmore. But sports movie is a stretch.
We'll definitely have to make a Tom Hanks Mount Rushmore. That seems like
That
a
could
good
come.
topic. So yeah, that's a good
It'll be a
one.
moment in time when he's got his next movie coming out. Maybe that'll be the moment.
Lots of good picks. I heard everything. I mean, I heard things from like Gary Cooper and Newt Rockney films, all the way to more modern stuff. So I heard a lot of different chatter out there. But this week we're kind of mixing things up a little bit. If last week was a very accessible even to a casual fan, we're getting a little bit into the weeds a little bit with uh, with our pick this week. Joe, why don't you give us the rundown? What are we doing?
Yeah, we are doing the NFL draft. So this is probably going to come out during the weekend. So the draft may have already happened. I'll warn you in advance. We're recording this beforehand. So if there's some mind blowing draft news that we didn't cover, that's why I'm just covering our bases by saying that. But this is a great week to cover two different Mount Rushmores because I felt ours could step on each other in this case. Mike's going to be the pessimist here with his choice of Mount Rushmore of draft busts. And I'm going to be the optimist with my draft sleepers pick.
Right. And this is great because now we're not competing for the same picks. We're definitely not going to go over each other. But also wildly different, right? On one hand, you have the guys that should have been and never were. And then you guys that had the guys that never should have been and somehow became icons or at least great players in their own right. So what a great start. But first, we got to talk a little bit about criteria, Joe, because how do you select somebody for, let's say, let's do yours. How do you select somebody for a sleeper pick? What's your criteria for your Mount Rushmore?
So I'll start off by saying this. They have to have actually been drafted. So there's a lot of great undrafted guys. So if you're crapping on me for not choosing Tony Romo or Kurt Warner, whoever else, no apologies because they were not drafted. I consider anybody late rounds that way overachieved. You know, there's some debates of some second, third rounds overachieved, but to me, it's the real late rounds. It's the sixth, seventh, and later. And when I say later, I mean really pre 1970.
Which they did go.
That's a little tease on what I may choose. Sorry.
Speaking on my end, for my criteria, I'm doing draft bust. These are the guys that should have been and never were, or at least tried and flamed out, or something else happened to them. My criteria is obviously you've got to have been drafted top 10. You got to be in the top 10 or higher. So this leaves out people like Tim Tebow, right? Who's this great college pedigree, but he was drafted late in the first round, so he doesn't count. Also, what were the expectations? Were these guys legitimate killer athletes in college and were these amazing prospects? Or was this one person's opinion of who should have been where? And then finally, how bad are they? Like, were they actually pretty good on the field but had off the field issues or injuries? Or were they just, well, really bad on the field? And I think that when we mix all those together, we'll have a good list here. So,
I'm looking forward to hearing yours. There's a large list of infamous draft busts. Some of them arguably bigger names than some of the sleepers I may mention.
and one of those iconic names is going to be suspiciously absent from my list, but he'll still be talked about in the show. But let's go ahead and kick things off, Joe. Let's get started. Number one pick in no particular order, but what's your first pick for sleeper NFL draft picks?
So the elephant in the room, the one that's going to be on every single person's Mount Rushmore. Let's just start it off first, and that is the GOAT, Tom Brady, my
Obviously.
childhood idol. I'll embarrassingly admit that I did have a fat head of him on my wall. If you remember those, Mike, when I was a
That's
child.
still a is that still a thing? Fatheads? I don't
I
know.
would be
So
curious. In fact, I would get a Jaden Daniels one right now if they
there we go.
existed as a Commanders fan. But Tom Brady, 6th round pick, um, infamously 6 quarterbacks picked ahead of him. In fact, they made an entire documentary called The Brady Six about those six. One of them being Chad
Wow.
Pennington, who could have lived
I
up to
remember him.
something without some injuries. But first overall pick in that draft and second overall pick were two Penn State guys in 2000. My
Interesting.
Redskins of our Arrington, number two,
Oh
and
yeah.
number one was Courtney Brown, defensive end. But I
I
think we'd
remember
all
both.
agree Tom Brady was the best selection in that draft. Um, and I looked into reasons why. He had a pretty high profile college career, finished off his senior year with a Rose Bowl championship, throwing 6 touchdowns, a Michigan grad. Um, but I think what really knocked him was the scouting combine. There's that famous mugshot shirtless photo of him at the combine and the walking jog or power walk, I'll say, 40-yard dash he did that really knocked him down a few notches for his athleticism. But hindsight's 2020. Don't judge a 5.23 as you see it.
No, and that's I would have really called you out if you had not included Brady on your list. And of course, I'm a lifelong Dolphins fan, so I'm used to disappointment all my life, but a lot of that disappointment in the 90s and mid throughout pretty much the 20s, the 2000s into the 2010s came at the hands of that man, Tom Brady. So for a long time I disliked Tom Brady, and still I have some personal distaste for the guy, but it's hard to argue GOAT status, right? I mean, like I think and this is off topic, but I think his Super Bowl win with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers basically sealed the deal. That was the exclamation point on the greatest of all time. So,
Yeah. Resume
two
speaks for
cents.
herself. But who
All
you
right.
got, Mike?
All right, I got a draft picks, and before I give my number one, I'm going to address the one that everybody else probably has at the top of their list, and he doesn't make it to mine, and that's Jamarcus Russell. Now, Jamarcus Russell probably should be on some sort of draft list as all-time bust, and everybody probably has him, but it doesn't fit my criteria. Sure, he was a number one overall pick, don't get me wrong, and that's pretty high. In fact, he's the highest on all of my picks. But what it comes down to is the expectations. The only person that really believed that Jamarcus Russell was the overall number one pick was Al Davis. Let's be honest, even from a consensus standpoint, Jamarcus Russell didn't fit the mold of being a number one. He shouldn't have been. Most scouts at the time didn't have him that high. He didn't win any major awards. He won the Manning Award, but he wasn't even a final, or he was a finalist, but he didn't win the Davy O'Brien Award. So he barely had any credentials that were really stellar from his college career. And to understand why Al Davis chooses him number one overall is a history of who Al Davis was as the owner of the Raiders for so long. And the best way I can put it to a person who doesn't know this history is if you were a fan of the Raiders during the time period that Al Davis was the owner and basically running the show there, it would be best to give the analogy of riding a roller coaster in total darkness because you had these highs and the lowest lows and extreme left and right turns all over the place, and you couldn't see any of them coming because it was one guy's opinion over anybody else's. And so, I mean, he picked people that were track stars because they were fast, James Jett, Willie Gault. He picked, obviously, for all of the, he did pick, Bo Jackson. And for all of the Bo Jacksons that he picked, you got 5 or 6 of these guys that had no business. But he picked a kicker in the first round, right? I mean, the guy was
Yep.
something unique all the way around. So, anyways, Jamarcus Russell isn't on my list, but for my number one, the Boz. Brian Bosworth is
Oh,
one of these quintessential draft busts. He's a guy 1988. He's the first pick in the supplemental draft. The reason for that is because he wasn't eligible for the draft. He even wrote letters of disinterest to teams because he didn't want them to draft him. The dude was an absolute star at Oklahoma for the Sooners. He's the only college defensive player to win 2 Butkus Awards. He's number 30 on the greatest 100 greatest college players of all time, which was, and in 1999 he was inducted into the Sports Illustrated All Century team as one of only 9 linebackers on the squad. But he gets to the NFL with all of this hype. This guy is a surefire, can't miss, and he doesn't have very good. He has really one season that's pretty mediocre. He doesn't live up to the hype. And by the time he finishes the second season, at the end of that, his shoulders are in such bad shape that the team doctor won't even clear him to play, and he has to retire due to these injuries. So he is a huge time flame out. Okay, really mediocre to lackluster performance for what should have been one of the greats,
yeah, I would say injury is really what killed his career. He
for
had a
sure.
pretty solid rookie year, and there was a lot of buildup. He was a PR dream for
Mhm.
Seattle, and I would say the Bo Jackson game that we all remember, where Bo rams him over in the end zone, really did a detriment to his reputation. And I think between that and injuries, it was hard to bounce back. When you have that sky high rise, it has a pretty deep fall. I would argue he's better known now as the sheriff of Dr. Peppertown.
And certainly, and he goes on to have well, I wouldn't say a good acting career, but he had an acting career, right?
Solid
He
B
was
movie.
he was
He could
in
have been
some
Ivan Drago in another world for all I know.
he had some of the best awesomely bad action movies, and notoriously had a television show canceled after one episode. But yeah, Boz, he's on my number
So
one.
maybe he's on
Joe,
the NFL draft bust list, but not the Hollywood draft bust list.
excellent. Joe, what do you got number two, man? Hit us.
I have the 1995 draft, 6th round pick, Terrell Davis.
Oh, TD.
Yeah, he went to Long Beach State before the school got disbanded and went to Georgia. And there were 5 running backs taken in front of him, including the first overall pick, Jagana Carter at a Penn State, who flamed out,
Yeah.
who could be on your draft bust list for all I know.
He
Um,
was certainly on my short list, let's put it that way. So
it wasn't due to lack of talent. With the transfer, he went to Georgia and had a good start, but got injured in his senior year. And between a lack of tape at Georgia and coming from Long Beach State and the injuries, left a lot of question marks. So he went pretty late because of that. But Hall of Fame career. And
yeah.
I wouldn't say the injury prone piece wasn't true. It's kind of why he had such a short career in the NFL with only 7 seasons. But a 2,000-yard rusher, Super Bowl MVP, multiple Pro Bowls, certainly the best running back in that class, bar none.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was that low on the. I didn't know he was that low. So, because I always think of that guy as being a pretty dominant running back
He
during the
was. He had a
90s there.
short
So,
span and he dominated when he was there. But to the draft board recollection, injury prone was an issue. But I'll take a short career for what he produced in the field during his time.
yeah, TD, he was pretty pretty stand out. I got a guy, another, let's do a running back here for running draft pick busts. It's not Kajana Carter, but it is a 96 guy, and it's Lawrence Phillips. He may not be the most common name that you would see on one of these, but I just want to give you the rundown. First of all, he was the 6th overall pick, so top 10. The guy he was on 2 national championship teams in college. He still holds the sophomore rushing record at Nebraska. He seemed like he was the future of the running backs for the Rams. And what do I mean by that? I mean, the same day that Lawrence Phillips is drafted by the Rams in 1996, the Rams decide to trade away their previously starting running back. And that guy, by the way, Jerome Bettis, who went on to have a Hall of Fame career for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Rams clearly thought highly of this Lawrence Phillips guy. Phillips is going to have a spotted career nothing spectacular. In fact, pretty lackluster in all respects. He's one of the guys that really, Bosworth had a better career, honestly, in his 2 seasons than Phillips had in his multiple seasons in the NFL. He also played in the CFL and some international leagues, but who cares? He wasn't very good. The truth about Phillips is he was troubled. He was a troubled man, young man, all sorts of problems off the field. But the on the field stuff wasn't good either.
I'll be honest, Mike. I don't know a lot about Lawrence Phillips. I mean, shocker, he didn't pan out much, but still, that what a resume. Nebraska in the '90s. I know that was peak time. I'm not surprised that running back, especially that was a time where you draft the running backs early. I mean, let's be honest. You're not drafting running backs top five in today's NFL.
And it's funny you say that you don't know much about him, and that's kind of the trouble with my job here. Yours, we're probably going to know all of these guys. The people I'm talking about are these picks that didn't pan out. Of course, the notorious ones like Jamarcus Russell and the Boss. Don't
Sure.
worry, I got some more here. But
There's
Phillips
more,
is
yeah.
probably more interesting because it's the things that happened to him really. I mean, even during his career, even in college, he had problems and was suspended for certain things like assault charges, all of these off the field stuff. He's gonna die in prison, and I'm gonna get into that here in a little bit at the end of this show, because when I was doing the research on these guys, there's a dark side to these draft busts that I want to get to. But first, I want to hear your next pick, Joe. What else you got?
Yeah, I have Roger Staubach,
Of course,
1964 10th round pick.
10th.
Yeah, I live in Annapolis, Maryland. Naval Academy is incredibly close to me, so this one really means a lot.
Mhm.
And amazing college career. He was the last Heisman Trophy winner for the Naval Academy, walks off with a Sugar Bowl victory, and all of a sudden goes 10th round. You might ask yourself why. Well, I don't know how much you know about the service academies. Once you graduate, you have to serve 4 years. So he got drafted in the 10th round, not knowing whether or not he'd come back and play ball or if he'd be in shape to play ball 4 years later. And the NFL was very different at the time. It didn't have the same clout and money that people have today. In fact, many people may even have gone on to different careers, such as lawyers or doctors, when they could have been first round picks in the 1960s and earlier. So he had a passion for the game. If it was not Naval Academy, he could have played right away. He might have been a first round pick, but obviously a Hall of Famer, defined an era with 2 Super Bowls. Shorter career because of the 4 years he lost. I think he played around 11 seasons, but a legend in his own right. And 10 rounds don't even exist today, so I couldn't not acknowledge it.
That's a cool pick. And I mean, obviously Staubach's, Hall of Famer guy, all of that stuff, but I like the idea of the military academy guys because there's been picks in the recent past and guys that have been passed up because of that baggage that comes with the reality that you have to wait out a part of your career. And yeah, and of course Annapolis and all of that stuff. So I like that pick. That's a good one.
Yeah, he beat
I didn't
Army.
know that. So I got a guy that I hope you've heard of. Justin Blackman, 2012, fifth overall pick. The dude was Oklahoma State, my wife's alma mater, and he was a first team All-American. Two-time Biletnikoff winner. Blackman also holds the NCAA records for most consecutive games gaining 100 yards or more, and most games gaining 200 yards or more. He was named the 2012 Fiesta Bowl Offensive MVP in 2024, and he was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. This guy is a no-brainer for a pick. If you're going to pick somebody as a wide receiver to be on your team in that draft class, easy peasy, this guy should have been a surefire hit. And tragedy strikes. Not in, and it's tragic. The guy actually has a pretty solid first year rookie season, but he never plays again. He is so many off the field issues. I think he actually had a couple of games. Oh, he played 4 games in his second season, or no, excuse me. Yeah, he played only 4 games in his second season. But after that, Blackman is just going to go off the rails, loses control of his life, drugs, alcohol, all of those things. So this isn't about his talent or lack thereof. This was everything else that played into Justin Blackman. But this is a cautionary tale of what could have been for a guy
There's
that had so much talent.
there seems to be a theme in your list of the things
You're seeing
outside
it.
of just football, right? The distractions, the accoutrements that come with a lot of money and fame at a young age. Some people succeed because the NFL is just too big for them. They give it their all. We've seen that. But the ones where they get in their own way with all the talent, those are the real sad ones. But man, what I didn't know about the stat line for Justin Blackman.
Yeah, Blackman was a bona fide star coming out of college and probably would have been, I mean, even just one season, but I know that's not a big enough data set, but incredible first season, rookie season, probably would have had incredible time. So he's almost more of a tragedy. Yeah, you're right, Joe. You know, when I said, I was like, I want to do bust because they'll be more fun. And then I started thinking, and I was like, oh no, this is kind of sad. But I do have a glimmer of hope on my next one, I
Okay,
promise.
good. I was just say you can't end on the guy with the DUI charge, please.
Yeah, no, we won't end there. So,
Well, my last pick is a legend in the state of Maryland where I live, and that's Johnny Unitas from the Baltimore
oh yeah,
Colts.
Johnny, you.
Crazy story. He 1955 draft, ninth round, picked up by the Steelers. A lot of people don't know that. He was cut, didn't make the team. He didn't quit. He went on to play semi professional ball. And at the time, he was getting paid $6 a game. I don't know in 1950s what that equals today, but I can't picture you're doing super well. Um, this is a little bit of the Vince Papale story almost with the semi-professional player. I don't know if you guys know that for the Eagles, but went to get a second shot, lit it up in semi-pro. Colts sign him, works his way up, and the rest is history. You know, he's got 3 MVPs, 10 Pro Bowls, 5 first-team All Pros, member of the greatest game ever played, a Super Bowl victory, a legend of Baltimore. I'd be remiss not to mention him to be the final head on my list.
Well, and I mean, what a guy to pick out. And I love the time period. You didn't go with somebody more modern or anything like that. We do have modern guys on there, but like Johnny Unitas, I mean, one of the all-time great players in history.
Yes, in my Mount Rushmore, I'm going local, man. I want Baltimore and I want Annapolis on those
I
heads. Sorry,
I noticed
I'm
that.
biased.
I noticed you picked a couple local guys. Well, I guess we're all kind of in the same boat here, Joe, because I'm going to go local with my last pick, Ryan Leaf. Okay, when we're talking about draft
We're all
busts,
waiting for it.
he's the gold standard of draft busts. Really, think about my criteria. You got to be top 10. He's number 2, second overall pick. You know who was picked before him, Joe? You know who?
The famous Manning.
Peyton Manning is picked for him. Ryan Leaf goes number 2, and they said it was a toss-up. Most of the correspondents and people, pundits at the time, say it's a toss-up between these two. You can't miss. It turns out you could. He was a Washington State Cougar. Wazoo finished third for the Heisman. Leaf was also named first team All-America by Sporting News. Finished second in the nation in passer rating. And he goes into the NFL as the overall consensus number 2 pick, although he competed for that number 1 spot. He's going to play a total of 4 years, 3, 1 because of basically injury, didn't play at all, and actually kind of 2 because he only plays 4 games in his final season, and he doesn't win any of those either. And when we talk about these players, you got players like uh, Brian Bosworth, who was exciting, but then when he gets to the NFL was just, I mean, he was good, but he wasn't great. He didn't live up to the hype. You got guys like Lawrence Phillips, who never really was very good on the field, but had this tragic, off the field issues that kept him from that. You have Justin Blackman, who possibly could have been a great, and unfortunately had off the field issues. But when it comes to Ryan Leaf, okay, first of all, he had off the field issues, but the big issue was on the field. I mean, let's be honest, he sucked. He wasn't good at all. One of the all-time worst picks as far as performance-wise for Ryan Leaf.
Colts dodged a bullet. Good for them.
Yeah, the Colts picked right. All right, so Ryan Leaf is from Montana. I don't know if people know that. Obviously, probably think of him as from being from Washington. He wins the state championship for CM Russell, and he goes on to say some pretty awful things about Montana throughout his time of fame and infamy, notoriety. And of course, he's also one of these guys that had multiple off the field issues as well as prison time. But and I just wanted to bring all of this up and wrap up in this particular case is because when I started digging into this, when I started doing this research, Joe, you're right. A lot of these guys have some dark histories, and it's not just these four. It's a lot of these guys on pretty much all bust lists. And beyond all the fun and the big time investments, I noticed this kind of bleak dark side to this reality. Um, We're talking assault charges, long-term drug and alcohol abuse, jail sentences, and of course Lawrence Phillips, who is going to end up dying in prison. He's going to get accused of killing his cellmate, and then later, shortly, is going to take his own life. So, for just a moment, I just want to say this: we call them busts, but what if we stopped thinking of them as failed investments and started seeing them as young men thrown into a spotlight they weren't ready for, in a system that didn't catch them when they fell? Leaf might be the best way to finish my side of the mountain, because while he certainly took his knocks, not only on the field, but certainly off the field, his substance abuse issues, he's at least trying his best now. Leaf has recently, he's working as a program ambassador for Transcend Recovery Community, a group of sober living houses in Los Angeles, Houston, and New York. He even hosts a radio show, so good for him. He does work as a college football analyst on television. And while we have these absolute horror stories of these draft busts, and we probably takes a little bit of the fun out of it, but there's still some. Ryan Leaf might be that glimmer of hope that there are better paths forwards, even for the biggest of busts.
Ryan Leaf, great analyst. I really enjoy his
Yeah.
commentating too. Made a good career, and he's got a good story. But I'll be honest, Mike. I got to shoot back. You covered your bases with Jamarcus Russell. But let's be honest. I mean, this also was an era where if you were over 6'4" and you could throw an orange 60 yards on a knee, people draft you first overall. I mean, you take Al Davis, who's the flash and dash guy, and let's be honest, at that age, you got to be ready to cut the mic at any moment, above his skis. There's no bigger flop than Jamarcus Russell, in my opinion. It's your list, and I know you talked about it, but man, what a miss.
I tell you what, Jamarcus Russell is a sexy pick, and for most people, he's going to be at the top of the list for all of those reasons. And part of it's those apocryphal stories. The stories about Jamarcus Russell are actually better than anything else that he ever actually did. The story about him throwing the orange from the knee, the one about, I don't know if you heard about the DVD that he gets with all the plays that he's supposed to watch, and then he comes back and he's like, "Yeah, I watched him, and it was a blank DVD. The coaches didn't even put anything on it." Like, he's got some of the best all-time stories. And you're right. I'm probably, I here's something you should know about me. If it's probably the top of somebody else's list, I'm probably going to keep him off of mine for some reason. Maybe it's out of spite. I don't know.
Well, we all know the Jamarcus Russell story. I think we learned something with Justin Blackman and a few others.
I think overall, it's an interesting little game that we played here, right? Because we were looking at people that shouldn't have done it and then surprise hits and what a great success stories. And then we see some of these guys that should have been and then never were, and the tragedies that befell a lot of these guys on that side of it. And I think it leads to some bigger, larger contextual questions that are outside of just the fun and games of picking lists. So I think in a weird way, we kind of touched on some big topics here today, Joe.
Well, I'd like to close on the NFL draft as we have it coming up, or maybe having passed, depending on when you're listening to this. To all you draftees out there, if you're listening, don't let the hype get to your head. And for all you that are picked late, remember those that came before you, that overachieved what people thought of them. Every pick and every pick thereafter has a shot. When you have an opportunity, take advantage.
Dude, I dig it. I dig it with a big shovel. Well, that's it for us, man. But the real question is, what would you carve onto your mountain? Till the next episode, I'm Mike Mintz. He's Joe Mintz, and this is the Mount Rushmore Show.